What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Right Mindset. Today's lesson, we're going to go over something that I absolutely love. It's something that I teach my clients. I basically take the terminology and put it in my own words. And today I'm going to teach you about that terminology, which is how to challenge your story, characters, and the outcomes of those choices. We're going to use examples from the TV show Game of Thrones. I'll explain what challenging something looks like, when to do it, and why it's helpful to create real narrative flow. Remember, plot is what happens in a story. How it happens is why it matters. Okay, let me repeat that because it was not clear. Uh, Plot is what happens, and story is how it happens and why it matters. So the plot is ultimately the backdrop of what needs to happen, the beats. The story is basically how it unfolds, the how it happens and why it matters, the thing that makes us emotionally interested. No one's interested in plot. No one cares that they have to rob a bank, but they care why they need to rob a bank. Okay, and how they rob the bank. Now, what happens is boring without conflict, leading to resolutions that make story. Right. So if you're watching a story, it's boring if there's no conflict and if nothing's really leading to anything, or if it just easily leads to a resolution. There's no story. This is done through the choices of your characters when they are challenged. That's how we create conflict. That's how we create movement and show some enjoyment. And today we're going to go over how to implement challenging moments, and we're going to give you an example for the first season of Game of Thrones, and show you how they use challenging to make the story move forward and make it interesting. So, as always, let's get to developing the group. What? The drugs are wearing off. Let's develop the right mindset. Oh, yeah. All right. So today, again, we're going to go over how to challenge a story. Before we get started, thank you so very much for joining me. If you're new here or you've been here before and you just haven't made that commitment, but you're really enjoying the videos, this video in particular, or the other videos that you watch, please support the channel by subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you don't miss out. Let's get right to it. What is challenging? Challenging is what I call adding conflict. So often in stories, I see the plot being the most important element of a writer's project. A novel needs more than a plot. A good plot with no story is boring, as much as a great story with no plot goes nowhere. Think of a plot as the skeleton to what needs to happen, and story as how it happens to them and basically forms the complete body. Imagine if your story, imagine in your story, you needed character X to meet character Y. This is the what needs to happen. They need to meet. Challenging adds the how or what happens to get them to meet. Now, if character X needs to meet character Y, we challenge it by adding some form of conflict. That conflict can be anything you want. But without conflict, it's just things happening, but nothing is happening. Again, if there is no conflict, then things are just happening in your story, but nothing is really happening, meaning like it's just going through the flows to make something happen. Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to let you see this on the screen, but first, I got to get it over here. Give me 1/10 second. All right, so this will be the first example I give you because I love you guys. I love you guys. Okay. All right, so This first example I'm going to give you. Beep. All right. This is what things are just happening looks like. So this is plot without story. This is things are just happening. All right. What is the setup? What is the plot? Well, the plot is character X needs to meet character Y. So they both enter a deli, no conflict. They get on the line right next to each other, no conflict. One of them turns to the other and says hi, no conflict. The conversation is amazing, no conflict. They exchange information, no conflict. Now, is there a movie there? Yeah, why not? It's just plot, though. There's no real story. So we see two characters enter the deli. Oh, look, okay. We meet character X and we meet character Y. They both get online. They both look at each other. Oh, hey, we look. I needed them to meet. They met. Done. Next scene, right? But what is really there's no story. So this is what it looks like when things are happening and show movement in the story. And the way we do that is we push back with a little bit of conflict. And this is what that looks like. So again, the setup is character X needs to meet character Y. Character X is in a hurry and goes to open the door to the deli, but character Y jumps in front of them with a nasty look. Conflict. Now, there's a lot of conflict here. We've set up that there's some urgency on character X's part that they need to get their whatever they're getting and get out of there. Character Y is also in some sort of hurry, or maybe not, but they jumped in front of slowing down character X. They weren't necessarily being rude or mean. It's just they got there before the other person and they gave a nasty look because maybe character X was trying to show that they were in a hurry. Conflict. We're already establishing some sort of emotional pushback and character X needs to get out of there. Okay. Which brings us to the next beat. So character X grabs what they need and sees character Y last online and is annoyed he has to stand next to them. This is conflict. They're in a hurry. They had this stuff. They really don't want to because it was uncomfortable for their first meeting. Now they got to stand next to them. So character Y, character Y, or just so you could see where character Y lifts up their phone on the screen. Oh, by the way, so we know that character X is now on the line. So character Y lifts up their phone on the screen as an article for the show character X writes on. So here's conflict too, because now they have something in common, right? But everything that's built up in this scene, this moment, has led to this being interesting because character X writes on that show and character Y is reading an article on that show. So there has to be some sort of interest on their part. Okay. All right. Which brings us to this. Character X makes a comment about the show that leads to a conversation where they connect through the topic of the show. Therefore, no conflict. We've earned the right to give them something. You do want to still give people some victories, right? Which leads us to character Y gets rung up and says goodbye to the person, and character X says goodbye, but really wants to get their number. Conflict. And the reason is because through that conversation where they connect through the topic, that's where they're going to discover that they have something really in common, that they have really good traits, etc., etc. That's the win that fuels it. So now we have to give conflict to that goodness, which is now one character is leaving, and the other one has to get their stuff rung up, but they're also running late because they're in a hurry. But they're like, oh, do I get rung up? Do I not get rung up? Oh, I should have got her number, whatever the case may be. Then character X leaves their food on the counter and runs out to catch up to character Y. This is conflict because do I make it? Okay. And I left my food, which is the only reason I originally came here anyway, right? Character X sees them getting into the cab. Conflict. I missed my chance. And we reward them. Character Y notices character X when getting into the car and stands back outside of it. No conflict. And then finally, they exchange information. So we give them some victories, but leading up to there's a lot of conflict that makes the victories worth it. They've earned those victories. All right. So that's something to keep in mind when you're working on a conflict. Now, what I showed you is challenging the scene, but wait, we need to challenge the plot of they need to meet. And it turns out they actually connected on something and took action to make the next step happen. So, how do we challenge the plot? The plot is they have to meet. Now, we already let them meet, but do we end it there? Do we make it easy? Well, he got the number, they exchange information. It turns out they actually liked each other's personalities. So, can we challenge the plot itself? We were challenging the scene, and we were challenging character choices to make choices that are victories worth it. They earn those moments. But now it's a bigger story. So, how do we challenge the bigger story? Well, here we go. The big challenge is that character Y is actually the sibling of the producer who produces the show character X writes on, which turns out to be why character Y was reading an article, because she has a connection to that show. But wait, how do we challenge this even more? We have a scene where character X talks to a coworker about this person they met. Then in the scene, it leads to the producer coming in, and it turns out they are not happy with character X's direction with the show as a writer. So, how do we challenge this even more? Well, maybe character X says something that is offensive on social media site and it gets back to the producer, who finds what they said unprofessional. But how do we challenge this even more? Well, they are all invited out to dinner to celebrate the show getting picked up. Who's at the dinner? Character Y, who looks like they are there with the producer on a date, and character X sees this like, but it turns out they are related, so they're not on a date. Character X makes a move only to be challenged by the producer stepping in, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we're creating challenges for them to achieve the plot, and that creates story. But if they meet at the deli, they have a great conversation, maybe the girl's like, oh, by the way, here's my number, give me a call. And then, it turns out all that is true. They are related to the producer, but the producer loves character X. Oh, you're doing a great job. I love the new script you wrote. Very witty stuff you're writing on social media. Keep that up. It's good publicity. I know it was a little touchy of a subject, but I like the content. No such thing as bad publicity, right? The producer is very much for what's going on. And then, of course, they're happy. Oh, yeah, this is my sister. Oh, you two know each other? Well, we met at the deli. Oh, my God, you'd actually be a great couple. You know what? Take my company car. I had a restaurant appointment to go with for a business meeting, but I'll cancel that. You two go on a date. There's no conflict. It's just things are happening, but nothing is actually happening. And that ruins your story. Now, the process of challenging the plot. Ooh, here we go. Let's go a little deeper into this concept, okay? You have to set up the plot or subplot, then challenge that setup and explore the consequences of that challenge. Basically, what we just did with the plot being they need to meet, and we kept pushing back on it. The consequence should create a new setup that needs to be challenged, which would result in a new consequence. By the way, a consequence can be good or bad. A good consequence can still have conflict, as the good results leads to a later conflict. How do we know how and where we will challenge the overall plot and create story around it? This is as easy as writing out 1 to 4 sentences to explain what the subplot or main plot is. In my example, where character X and character Y need to meet, we still need to fill that plot or subplot in. If it were a romance, it would be the main plot. If it were a drama, it might be a subplot, though it could be the main plot. Let's assume it is the main plot, okay? This would be what the 1 to 4 sentence explaining the main plot would look like. Okay? So let's get that going. Okay. Character X has focused on their job for the last 10 years, but their creative energy is draining with each passing year until they meet character Y, who is the polar opposite of them. Over the course of trying to discover what it is about the energy they clearly have, Character X finds a new perspective on their creative process and develops their own show that is filled with hopeful energy, unlike the fart and poop sitcom they work on now. The discovery of their relationship is made by the producing brother of Character Y, who will try to stop their relationship and stop Character X from leaving the show to go work on another. Finally, they find their rhythm in the relationship, a balanced life working together as Character Y becomes a producer and Character X becomes the head writer on a hit primetime comedy. Okay, now, the setup is Character X has focused on their job for the last 10 years, but their creative energy is draining with each passing year until they meet Character Y, who is the polar opposite of them. Now, that's taking Character X and Character Y need to meet and expanding it to have some sort of depth. Now, we have to challenge the elements in this sentence. Them meeting needs to either be easy, which is no conflict, or difficult, which is a conflict. But we know that they are going to meet because they have met, right? They have to. They have to meet for the plot to exist. The setup is them living their lives and finally meeting. So that has to be challenged. The challenge is how they meet. As we explained above, their meeting was rough and led to them finally exchanging information at the deli. But even meeting one another needs to lead to a consequence. The consequence in that situation is a good one. They both want to see each other again, but what is keeping them from meeting up? And that's the next challenge. They want to see each other again, but what is in their way? It turns out the producer is related to character Y, but also already is not happy with character X. This is doubling the challenge. What's the consequence? It's going to be difficult to get a date with character Y, and character X's career is having some pushback, and they are not getting treated well, even more so once the producer realizes that they like their sister. So there's a lot of conflict there. And we did that by creating a challenge to push back. What would that challenge look like? And we explored that. Now, to be fair, when you're challenging, it's as simple as saying what would really roadblock this. All right. But again, remember, you also want to have some victories. So if you have 3 or 4 challenges in a row or 3 or 4 conflicts in a row, even if they're quick little beats, you still need to allow your hero, your protagonist or protagoni, right? The multiple protagonists to win. You need them to win something. It could be a moral victory, an emotional victory, a physical victory. It could be whatever the case may be. But for a story, for people to connect, they need to see that they have the capability of succeeding. And, but if everything is a conflict and a failing, or the consequence leads them even deeper and deeper and deeper, you can create basically a disillusioned character where it's just like nothing's going to work out for this person. Sometimes that's good for comedies. Like Meet the Parents is like that. Like literally every scene is a fail. They nothing is working for them. They're being putting into situations where, well, I have nipples. Can you milk me, Greg? Right? Or Craig or whatever his name is. The big victory is that the daughter loves him and he loves her more than anything in the world. And, just because he burnt down the gazebo and a whole bunch, spoiler, and ruined the wedding and all this other crap. They love each other so great. I support it. You got to really earn your things. So let's look at Game of Thrones. All right. Now, Game of Thrones. This is we're setting up Jaime Lannister and Cersei. The setup is that they're hiding their relationship because, spoiler alert, I think this is the first time I'm using a spoiler alert correctly. They're brother and sister, and they are lovers. Okay. So the setup is that Jaime accompanies King Robert to Winterfell, where the king plans to ask Edward Stark to replace Jon Arryn as Hand of the King. So that's the setup, where Jaime's there, Cersei's there, the king is there, Edward Stark is there. and it's setting up the main plot of the main story. The subplot is that Jaime and Cersei are there, and that it's explained in that opening scene that they have their brother and sister. Okay, and that Cersei's the queen, and that Jaime is captain of the guard or whatever. Okay, so how do we challenge this? Well, if you've seen the show, the first episode, Cersei and Jaime Lannister are in the derelict tower, the tower that's falling apart. They have a fear of being caught, so they're trying to hide it. And as it would, because it would mean that not only would Jaime and Cersei be killed, but the children would be murdered too. They would kill the kids. So, what is the consequence of them trying to hide? Right? We're challenging this by making them hide. They're trying to hide. So, what is the consequence? Well, Bran Stark climbs the tower, looks through a window, and finds them engaged in sexual intercourse. Ooh. All right. Now, we want to challenge that consequence. All right. So he is caught watching Cersei's. At that point, Jaime is able to make it to the window to grab him. Right. So Bran didn't escape. Jaime got to him. Right. What's the consequence? Well, Bran's seen this. He's startled by everything he's seen, and he's like, "This is crazy. There's something wrong going on here." Right. So how do we challenge that? Well, Jaime is going to push Bran out the window, which turns into the consequence that Tyrion ponders the circumstances of Bran's fall with an uneasy Jaime, and so they get questioned. All right, for this, they're like, "Well, how did he fall? Like, I don't understand how he fell. Like, he's a great climber. We already established that earlier, that he's a good climber and that he does it all the time. He climbs hundreds of times without ever falling, and this time he falls." Anyway, so we challenge that information. Okay. By several days later, Tyrion tells his family that Bran is expected to live and notes his siblings' guarded reaction to the news. He's like, "Oh, the guy who knows something," but Tyrion doesn't know that he knows something, but he's like, "Hey, did you know the kid that fell mysteriously? He's going to survive. He's going to be okay." So that means Jaime then hints that it would be in the House of Lannister's best interest if Bran were to die. I don't know if you know this, but they send somebody to kill Bran, which doesn't work out. But so what's the challenge? Well, let's push back on the Stark family. Jaime awaits for Stark to arrive in the throne room to measure Edward's knowledge of the situation. Okay. We're putting him a little close to the line, basically. No pun intended. What's the consequence? Jaime is unhappy with Edward judging him for killing the Mad King, building emotional tension. That's the thing. Like, we're building on the main plot of the story because obviously Jaime and Cersei are going to influence the Ned Stark, but also we're working on the relationships, and that every moment to basically, check if what the damage is and where the damage is going is leading to more issues or deeper into it, and which comes back to a raven arrives at King's Landing with news of Bran's recovery, therefore qualifying and solidifying the fact that Bran is okay and he's awake now. So Cersei fears he will expose their secret, but Jaime comforts her. Okay, so that's the consequences, that she's afraid. She's going to start acting erratically. And Jaime's going to start acting erratically and doing some pretty aggressive stuff. And he confronts her, and they probably do the nasty, right? So how do we challenge the fact that they're afraid? Well, upon hearing of his brother's capture by Catelyn Stark, he confronts Edward in the streets of King's Landing, which is a bold move. Remember, Ned Stark is the hand of the king at this point. All right? And, Jaime is using this as an opportunity not only to try to save his brother, but also kill Stark and get him out of the picture. Okay? But what is the consequence? Well, knowing that killing Edward would result in Tyrion's death, he instead has Edward's guards executed. So he kills all of Edward's like friends. That's the consequence, well, if they can't do that. So how do we challenge the fact that all these people were killed and Therian is still captive? Well, there we go. He and Edward fiercely cross swords in an intense duel, and Jaime is surprised that Edward is a match for him. The fight ends abruptly and prematurely when a Lannister guard stabs Edward through the leg. Jaime let Edgard, I'm sorry, live at as it would have not been a clean death. And the clean death is the thing he wanted. He wanted to look like he was able to kill him, basically illegally, But in this situation, because Jaime was like, you know what, we're just going to kill your people. And then, Stark was like, no, we're fighting. So what's the consequence? Well, an irritated Jaime knocks out the guard and then departs the city, telling Eddard that he wants his brother back. So Jaime knows he has to leave, right? And the consequence is that he's leaving the city. Okay? And how does he leave the city? Well, we challenge that by having Jaime join the army of his father, right? And in the field, they discuss the legacy of his father. And more importantly, so Jaime's pride and how he spends so much effort trying to convince others he doesn't care what they think of him. They have an argument, okay? And like, why did you let him live? And it's like, well, because his victory would not have been clean, which is, solidifying that truth. He says that if other houses think they can take a Lannister hostage and not suffer for it, we're going to lose some respect for the Lannister name. So that's the challenge, is like, oh, because of all this stuff, now the Lannister name is being pushed around, and like maybe other people will try to take attack to the Lannisters. His brother's still in trouble. Jaime's technically on the run, even though he's with the army, but he's like, he did attack the king's hand. Okay. Which brings us to the consequence of all this behavior, which is that the father, Tywin, says that Jaime must accept responsibility for the future dynasty of their house, which will be decided by this war against the Tullys and Starks. They will either die out like the Targaryens or begin a dynasty that will last thousands of years. He gives Jaime 30,000 men and sends him to besiege Riverrun. So because the Lannisters' name is being challenged, or potentially could be challenged, and that all this is going on at King's Landing, and, the consequences that he has to go fight a war. Now, keep in mind, this is all because Jaime and Cersei did not want to get caught having sex or being in a relationship, because their twin brother and sister, and they don't want their kids to be killed because of their indiscretions, right? So, or lack of indiscretion. So, challenge, Robb Stark marches 2,000 men towards Tywin's forces in order to create a distraction. The remaining forces, basically, this is how they capture Jaime. So right now, to understand what's going on, is Jaime and Cersei didn't want to get caught, so they went hiding in a tower. Like, they love each other and want to be with each other so much that they were like, well, I don't care where we are. I know the king's here. Let's just go in that tower. It looks like no one ever goes in the tower. Bran catches them. So Jaime's like, I'll fix this. I'll just kill Bran. Well, now is Bran dead? Is he not dead? We're getting word that he might survive. Let's send somebody to kill him just in case. So that didn't work out, because we just got a raven that gave us word that he's going to make it and he's fine. So it's like, oh, man. But then they find out evidence that it's potentially that Jaime had something to do with it. The Lannisters had something to do with it. So since the brother's there, they take the brother captive. And now Jaime's like, oh my God, I got to go save my brother. But maybe if I kill the Starks, right? It didn't go well. He went to go kill Ned, and then that didn't work. So he had to leave the city, and then he joined up with his father. And his father's like, you're messing things up. To fix this, you got to go Get your brother and kill the Starks. Anyway, by doing so, Jaime is captured by Robb's army. Robb initially intends to use Jaime as a bargaining chip for his father and sister's lives. So how do we challenge this? Oh yeah, you got we're gonna give you Jaime if you give us my father. And then they're like, no, Eddard's gonna be spoiler executed in King's Landing before news of Jaime's capture can even reach the capital. P.S. His death is a direct consequence of Neddard finding out that the children are not Robert's. Moreover, the challenge to if anyone finds out we are lovers has been heightened too. They are not Robert's kids. Therefore, if they find out, Jaime and Cersei and their kids will be killed. So now it's double the consequence, and we're challenging it even deeper, going, he knows something so heavily that it's not just the fact that the brother and sister are sleeping together. It's that the brother and sister are sleeping together and the kids are theirs. So that's an issue. Catelyn Stark visits the captive Jaime. He taunts Catelyn, saying widowhood suits her, informing her that he would have sex with her if she was lonely. She hits him in the head with a rock. So he's putting himself in worse condition, but lo and behold, this leads, they won't kill him as long as his sisters hold Sansa and Arya. But Jaime Lannister always taunts others while he is in chains to show them he doesn't fear them and they aren't superior to him. Catelyn, she says he has gone against the laws of good gods and man. He says, what gods? Where were her gods when her husband was killed? Now, this is challenging a bunch of stuff right now, okay? It's challenging the situation between the hostages, Jaime's being held and the sisters being held. It's challenging the weight of Catelyn and the relationship with the Lannisters. It's challenging the fact that Neddard is dead. It's challenging religion and faith. There's a lot of challenge going on. There's a lot of pushback in this scene's beat, okay? Which leads to the consequence of when she says injustice in the world is because of men like him, he tells her, there are no men like me, only me. When asked directly, he admits pushing Bran from the tower, but doesn't reveal why. Which, by the way, all of this leads back to Bran being discovered as being the victim of Jaime. A couple extra gifts. The first season's main plot is Ned seeks to find who murdered his predecessor, Jon Arryn. He uncovers dark secrets about the powerful Lannister family, which includes Robert's queen, Cersei, that his predecessor died trying to expose the truth. Ultimately, the relationship between Jaime and his sister Cersei is a subplot, even though they are the catalyst of what happens before the series began with the death of the old hand Ned replaces. The subplot is challenged in a way where if A happens, then B happens. If people find out they are lovers, then they and their children will be killed. So every action is taken to push back on the Starks ever finding out, and each time they are pushed into a corner. So Cersei uses her challenge and consequence in a way that leads to Eddard Stark's death, which was the consequence of her killing her husband, the king, too. So she didn't choose to kill Robert, right? This is a whole other challenge. So if she didn't kill Robert, she wouldn't be in this situation. So kill the king, and it doesn't matter who knows she's in love with her brother. Well, Eddard sent out a note which starts a war and leads to him dying. Everyone is challenging and having consequences to their stories. Jaime uses his challenges to try and conceal it while keeping it in the down low, which results in his capture. Basically, he's not as in control as he feels he is. And what's crazy is the truth is revealed to some who are killed. And finally, the push of Bran is finally resolved when Jaime admits he did it. This is the end of the season. This subplot is concluded by the end of the first season, but fuels future seasons, creating questions like, why did Jaime try to kill Bran? Will Jaime ever get home? So there you go. There's a real-time example of how to challenge, and then kind of like going into like other variations of things being challenged. Now, to put it into perspective, uh, Jamie and Cersei could be like, we are lovers. No one cares. So we could be lovers and you could be married to Robert. The other version of that with no conflict is we are lovers. We're going to go have the sex in the tower. They have the sex in the tower. No one catches them. And it could go another round with no conflict. They choose to have sex in the tower. Bran sees them and goes, oh, I don't care. All right, have fun, guys. Bye. And, and then maybe it goes the other way. Well, we can't have you knowing, so we're going to kill you. So they kill him. They actually kill him. And then everyone's like, what happened to him? And they're like, he fell from the tower and died. Oh, okay. And it's over. There's no story. The plot is they don't want to get found out. They don't get found out. This is why we challenge things. This is why we push back on situations and choices. We push back on the plot. We push back on the characters. We push back on choices. Whatever it is, you got to say, well, how can I push back on this? And that will help you develop your story and add some movement to it. If things are just happening, then there's no story. But how it happens and why it happens will add story. And you could tell because if everything is just happening with ease and everyone's getting what they want with no consequence, then things are just happening, but nothing is happening. So keep in mind, you want to challenge your stories. All right, final thoughts. Woo! Now, challenging is about finding ways to understand the main setup of your plot or subplot and asking yourself, the setup is A needs to happen. The challenge is, well, if A needs to happen, then what is in their way to achieve it? The consequences are, if they achieve it, then what is the result of that? The result becomes the new setup, and so on. It keeps repeating on itself. And with all plots and subplots, there are scenes where each scene fuels the next scene and feeds off the last scene to ultimately pull a story forward. Things happening, but nothing happening is when things are without conflict. Use conflict to help bring a plot to life with a story. And you can challenge the setup of plot, scenes, and even character choices. Whatever the challenge is, know that the consequence can be something that directly affects the moment or fuels the future. So something that happens now, the consequence could happen later. Like it could come back later, okay? A great way to build a story is to challenge the plot, challenge the scenes, challenge the character choices, and find a nice relationship between them all. You want people to be friends, but what makes them butt heads? You want someone to be the hero? Well, what keeps them from taking action? You want someone to fall in love? What is keeping them from finding romance? That's really how you look at it. I want characters to become friends, or I want to showcase their friendship. All right, but what helps them butt heads? What does their friendship do? Oh, the White Castle movie. Oh man, White Castle movie. Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. I can't believe I can't remember. Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. They want to go to White Castle and get White Castle. That's the plot. Harold and Kumar want to go to White Castle to get White Castle. That's the plot. But the story grows and builds because of all the things that challenge them. They can't get to White Castle until the end of the movie. So that's why there's a story, because it's a very simple plot. We're high as a kite, or whatever it is. We want to go to White Castle and get some White Castle. And there's all these pushbacks. Okay? Very simple. Very simple. Anyway. The next video in this series will be us going over theme and how a theme can elevate your plot and story to add depth to it. What is a theme? How do you add themes to your stories? And can you have more than one theme in your novel? Are questions we shall answer in the next video in this series. Questions? What kind of conflicts do you like to see in novels? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you want to learn a little bit more about the craft, some insight to the industry, and hear from other authors like yourself, since we do a podcast that's available on YouTube and all other avenues, feel free to like, comment, and share this video, as well as subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you don't miss out. Okay, that's it. All right. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.